Hi, Joni here. Is Trump changing his strategy on Ukraine? That will be the topic of today's video. Ukraine accepted Trump's unconditional ceasefire proposal over 50 days ago. On the other hand, Russia still hasn't accepted it. And even worse, Russia has actually increased its strikes on Ukraine during that time. But after over 50 days, Trump seems to be finally changing his stance a bit. He's finally starting to blame Russia a little bit, which is a good sign at least on paper. However, it's good to remember that this isn't the first time. Trump tends to blame Russia every few weeks. He usually follows with some mild threats on social media but never follows through. So far he's been all talk no action on Russia. He's used the stick on Ukraine and the carrot on Russia. And he's insulted Ukraine and its leadership without ever daring to criticize Russia and Putin. Will this time be any different? Let's hope so. Ukraine and the US have finally signed the mineral deal. The deal they signed is quite different from the original one that was discussed a few weeks ago. And the new one is much more favorable to Ukraine. In this new deal, Ukraine does not have to pay anything for past aid. And in this new agreement, the US clearly blames Russia for the full-scale invasion. This deal isn't perfect, but it still potentially gives the US a small incentive not to totally abandon Ukraine. The downside of being more favorable to Ukraine is that it gives the US less of an incentive to care about the deal, as the US gets less from it. But the Ukrainian side is claiming that this deal will finance future military aid from the US. Let's hope that they are right, but the direction seems to be the right one. Ukraine's diplomats have done a nice job. And to add to that, Trump actually unblocked the sale of $50 million worth of arms for Ukraine. This was the first US sale of weapons to Ukraine since Trump took office. $50 million is absolutely nothing when talking about weapons, but it's still a step in the right direction. The US also seems to be selling old F-16 frames to Ukraine, which is great because Ukraine's aging fleet of F-16 jets needs a lot of spare parts to keep running, or actually flying. Let's hope that Trump is ready to sell things that Europe doesn't produce to Ukraine through the mineral deal. If the US could continue providing intelligence, Patriot batteries and interceptors for them, and also ammunition and spare parts for the other American systems they have sent, and some missiles and bombs for the F-16s, then Europe could take care of the rest. But let's see what will happen. Trump is really unpredictable and he tends to change his mind quite often. Let's hope that he is starting to realize that his strategy of appeasing Russia and pressuring Ukraine is not bringing us closer to the end of the war. It's actually the other way around. The strategy of using the stick on Ukraine and the carrot on Russia is not only traitorous, but it's also completely flawed. It just doesn't work. And the fact that the US seems to be abandoning its role as a mediator proves it. Russia currently has no incentive whatsoever to end its unprovoked war on Ukraine. Russia has not reached its strategic goals in Ukraine, and Putin is convinced that Russia's negotiating position will improve over time. Putin is clearly convinced that he can outlast the West. And as Trump is not pressuring Putin at all, Russia prefers to play for time. And the Trump administration might be starting to understand that. And when listening to the latest comments by J.D. Vance, it seems that the US has effectively given up on its role as a mediator in this war. And J.D. Vance understands that there won't be any end to this war, at least anytime soon. J.D. Vance claims that the US has done its job and that it's now up to Ukraine and Russia to end the war. And that's obviously a huge change in rhetoric. And it was expected. So let's see what happens. The Trump administration is not the most reliable, but the current outcome is not the worst for Ukraine. Let's see how long it lasts. How long do you think that Trump can avoid pressuring Russia? Are the latest shifts in rhetoric purely symbolic? Will the US end up selling more weapons to Ukraine? Or will the US just take a step back and do nothing? Or even worse, will the US end up blaming Ukraine for failing to end the war? Will the US withdraw sanctions from Russia? I want to hear your takes on these questions. Share your thoughts in the comments. That was it for today's video. I hope that you liked it. If you did, please like and subscribe and see you in the next video. Thank you.